Welcome back to the Home Lab, and I've got a really interesting blast from the past for you today, and I hope for some of you it'll bring back some memories of your youth. What we're going to look at is the truly amazing Philips Electrical Engineering EE08 kit from back in the 1960s. So what I'm going to share with you today is this absolutely fantastic electrical kit from back in the 60s. In fact, it was produced by Philips in Holland in 1966. So this was out just before I was born. Now, you've got to be prepared for a bit of FJ storytelling here if you'll sit back and enjoy what I'm going to do. Because do you all remember electrical kits and chemistry sets and things like that? I certainly remember them from my youth, and to be honest with you, I found electrical kits a little bit boring. That's perhaps the wrong word, but a little bit, I couldn't really access them because I didn't really understand what they were all about. And it seems obvious, doesn't it, now that you used to build a radio, for example. Well, as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, I didn't have a radio and I didn't listen to radio when I was that young. So what was radio all about? I didn't really understand why I wanted to make one. And it was only when I got a little bit older and I started with crystal sets and things and realised it wasn't radio that we were listening to per se. It was the fact that we could build something at the time without a battery with very simple parts, not fully understanding how it worked, and actually receive radio signals, often in languages that I didn't understand from very different and distant places that I'd never visited. And that was the excitement of it. Now, the reason I mention that is this is completely different. This kit is quite an early one, actually, and it was made probably only about 10 years or 8 years after the transistor really became something that hobbyists could play with. But what's so fantastic about it, apart from the cover, which I think is truly amazing, it's of its period. So unfortunately, there's no female engineers or girls on here, which is a bit of a shame. But there's the young, chiselled young man dressed up in his smart clothes, probably looking rather like his dad. And then he appears to be talking to a fighter pilot who's out there, and there's ships and there's things, that helicopters flying and radar dishes and things like that. And it's all very exciting. I don't think any of these kits built a transmitting set, so I'm not totally sure what's going on here. But if you bought this, you could dream and you could build the wonderful experiments that are in here. Now, why this kit is set apart from any other I've seen, and when we open the lid, you'll see why. But it has an absolutely fantastic instruction booklet with it. And this booklet doesn't just say, oh, just wire this up and off you go. It explains all the components. It shows circuit diagrams. It shows sort of schematics. And at the back of the book, and I'll show you that in a minute, it even explains how each circuit works. So I think if I'd had this when I was younger, my career in electronics might have progressed even further, because this really was a self-learning course as well. And it's absolutely fantastic. Now, at the end of the video, hope you stay with me until then, I'm going to ask you a question about this, and I think you need to wait to see what that is. But what I'm going to do now is we're going to have a look at the manual, and we're going to have a look inside the box. Do any of you remember this one? There were two, in fact, the EE8 and the EE20. I've got to say, produced by Philips, and Philips were basically Mullard. I mean, they bought up all of the small and big transistor companies, and they basically owned Mullard. And Philips was a massive thing when I was a kid. I had family that were in Holland, and if you want to Google it, if you've never been there, I went to the original Millennium Dome. I went to Evoluon, which is still there in Eindhoven, and it's really worth looking at, because Evoluon was Philips's sort of science museum for children. I don't think it is that anymore. Is it just an office space? I'm not sure. but it's on legs and it's a UFO building. It's really, really amazing. And you can imagine as a 10-year-old, I was just thrilled by just going up to this thing, let alone going inside and looking at all the electronics and things which I actually don't remember that Philips had on display. But it shows you that these things can be really formative. And it also makes the point, I'm a parent now, that you can't push your children into things, never do that. But if your children are interested in things or studying things, go along with it. And my son loves what I do and I let him play with all the bits and pieces. And my father was exactly the same. And I have him to thank for my interest because he knew what things were really interesting and he took me out to see them and he talked about them. I still remember, it's a long story, isn't it? Sorry. I still remember we had a blackboard in the kitchen and it wasn't so we could scribble on as kids. But, and it wasn't high pressure at all, but Dad would be chatting about something and he'd go, oh, Ohm's law, of course. And I think he was reliving his school days. And he would sort of scribble something on the board. And, you know, that's kind of how I learned a little bit of physics and a little bit of maths from someone who was a medic. He was a doctor. And by pure coincidence, I ended up teaching physics at the school that he was at as a boy. So it's funny how these things come round in a full circle. Anyway, do you remember your electric sets? Do you remember what you had? Did you make some fun things? Or did you use magazines? And we've done that already with the electric candle video that I've done. We used a magazine to actually make a little project. But this is impressive. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at the manual and I'm going to show you what's inside the box and why I think it's one of the most outstanding, can we call it a toys ever built for children. So the manual that came with this kit is actually the manual that covers both the EE8 and the EE20, which I think is really clever because it gives you a hint of what you could do if you had the bigger set, or there was an additional set of components that you could add, I have no idea what it was called, but to the EE8, and that would make it into an EE20, and then you could follow the other circuits that were in this manual. But anyway, allow me just to read to you from it, because even though this was produced in Holland, the English is absolutely perfect, and it reads really well. So, electronics span the world. Electronics is a modern technique in which increases in daily scope and which makes possible what was once regarded as fairy tale. And I like this bit. Radios, gramophones and television sets are to be found in every home. Well, how many of you got, or have your children got access to a gramophone or a record player? And do you have a TV set? I suppose you might have a flat screen or something connected to the internet. And it goes on about radar and rockets and things. And this bit I like, and at home. All this, communication, signalling, measuring, controlling, and now even calculating, computers, blimey, is made possible by electronics. To many people, these techniques are like a closed book. The EE assembly kits, in which use is made of the most modern components, will enable you to open this book and understand it. No mathematics or difficult studies are involved, just your eyes and your own common sense. And as you go along, you learn to read the drawings, to get to know the components such as transistors, and to understand how the components in the sets work. Well, that's absolutely true because this is such a brilliant manual. Finally, the last paragraph, which I really love, assembling and experimenting. Lots of interesting circuits can be built with the EE assembly kits. Radio receivers, gramophone amplifiers, intercom systems are things which will give you as much pleasure in using as you had in building them. What a true story that is. Okay, I enjoy the builds, well, almost more so than the things that I, once I've manufactured them, it's the building process that I enjoy. Get on, FJ. And this is also true of the less well-known circuits. The monitoring set, the flashing light, the burglar alarm, the wetness indicator. Here we go. All this is without any risk of fire or burnt out fuses, for these transistor sets work on batteries. You do not need even a soldering iron. So without too much trouble and with a great deal of pleasure, you can amass so much knowledge and experience of electronics that your friends, your parents, and even experts will be astonished about what you know in this field. So, with that, we better get started. So let's now have a closer look at this manual before we delve into the box, because this is really interesting, as I said. It's not just something to rush over. So the inside front cover has two sections. They kick off straight away with a list of what can be built with this kit, and there's 8 circuits you can build with this kit, and then the extra circuits you could build if you have the EE20. And so EE8 you can build 8 circuits, and EE20 you can build 22 circuits. Okay, and then there was a sort of add-on kit that made the EE8 the EE20, but I really don't know anything about that. And then over here, this is how it's laid out, and I think it's really good. A good use of colour as well, I guess, unless you're colourblind, but it is clear typing on here. So this is where I read from earlier. But they kick off with general instructions and sort of a blue area, and then you can put your thumb in and go to the circuits and how they're constructed. And then at the back, the really important yellow section, which shows circuit diagrams, and we'll look at those in a minute, and shows them as blueprints, which is quite cool. I think that's to make them look a bit special as well to youngsters. But it explains extremely well how the circuit you've just copied, in fairness, you might not have understood it, but how it actually works. So let's turn over the page and have a look at how it kicks off. And we're into the blue section here, which tells you how to put the board together, but don't get confused by the colours here. This, I think, is absolutely excellent, that at the start they show you all the components that you're going to use. They often show you the circuit symbol for it. Now, I know these have changed, but they're perfectly understandable. And they do an explanation of what each component is. So you can open the box and lift out all the components and get an understanding for what they do before you even start building. And then there's a little bit on how to put the board together and how to connect the batteries. And I really love this. There's is it addendum? Someone's put some real effort in there. They left the text out on how to put together one of the sort of turny control knobs, and so there's a separate little bit of paper in there with the instructions on. Now, to be totally honest with you, it's not exactly unclear, but there it is. They wanted it laid out absolutely properly so all children could access it correctly, and they put some real effort in there. So we'll flick on and we'll go to the red section. And if I just go back to show you, red is the circuit construction. And here we go, page 22, 23. Perhaps I can stop on that one for a minute. There's the main board that you build on, and then there's an overlay you put on the board that I'll show you in a second, and that has pictures of the components on them, and you fit springs as with a lot of these kits, and then you wire up the components of the springs following the exact pattern that was on the board. And you won't see it here, but these flat batteries were probably ever ready or something like that, and that is an actual sticker. You can't see that, but I can feel it with my finger, that someone has gone through every single one of these manuals and put stickers on all of the pictures of the batteries, so they're covering up a trademark or something. That must have been a Philips one. Surely they could have just said Philips there. So we'll go on a little bit more, and here's another example of a circuit that could be built, and the same arrangement. You've got this card and you've got the batteries here and the components lying on pictures that are actually on the card that you're building on top of. So finally, let's turn to the excellent yellow section. So that's got a sort of finger tab, thumb tab, and over we go. And this explains quite a bit of electronics. And what I particularly like is this bit right at the beginning. Engineers and technicians of our great laboratories have designed the components in this EE assembly kit and have thought out circuits with all the skill and pleasure with which they work on radio, radar, or electronic controls or television. So it's trying to bring to you that thrill that you're doing the same thing as these people working actually at Philips at that time, designing modern electronics. And then there's explanations of how electricity and electronics works, which I think is really fantastic. And then we go in a little bit deeper. Once you understand your sort of theory of electrical components, here are pictures of the circuits as sort of blueprints, and they actually explain in detail how each circuit works. Now, you've got to remember that previously in the manual, the assembly instructions were a picture of the actual components. So when you reach this stage, you move on to actually understanding a circuit diagram. And they explain really well that circuit diagrams are used for the initial design and also for repair and things like that. But the actual engineers who are putting together circuits are actually thinking about pictures of the components, because they need to work out where they sit on the circuit board and how they fit into the cases, etc. So I think it's really interesting that you use both construction techniques. And if you look at the magazines of the time, they did the same. They took photographs of the components on the boards, and they also showed and explained circuit diagrams. So now let's have a look what's inside the box. So this, I hope you'll agree, is a thing of beauty. So let's take the cover off. I'll just put that to one side over here. And what you come across first, or at least the way I've packed it up, is you come across these lovely, they're not called schematics, are they? I can't remember what you call them. Maybe it is a schematic. But these are actually the cards that you lay down first on the baseboard, and it allows you to work out which components you're going to put in your circuit. So this is the gramophone amplifier, and you can see your electrolytic capacitors, and you can see the crimp to make sure you get them the right way round, and you can see your AF116 here and your AC126. Yes, I know what you're thinking about this fella, so we'll have a look at that in a minute. And there are these for all the different circuits, so there's clearly a radio circuit. And considering its age, I think it's survived really, really well. So I'll put that to one side, and the dials are there already calibrated, which is interesting. Here's the baseboard, and I won't show you now because we're going to do a build at some stage, but what you do is put the springs up through this and then lay these on top, and then you could put the components actually on top of that. So I'll put that out of the way. I've got much space in here at the moment. I think that's a later edition. Now feast your eyes on that. Okay. I was really thrilled when I first saw the inside of this box. I'm going to turn it around so maybe you can have yet another look at how marvellous it is. And it consists of all the parts you'll need, but with my sort of eye of interest in design as well, isn't this beautifully designed? Doesn't it just look thrilling? Am I a bit weird or something? But I think if I opened that as a young child, I'd be like, wow, what's this? And my son was straight away into these boxes, and he wanted to pull out a box and see what was inside. And these are exactly like the boxes that transistors and things came in. So there's your Mullard OA79, so a diode. And there's something lovely about the OA79 for those of you that know it. Look at the size of that diode. It's much bigger than the other crystal diodes, so it's a lovely device. So I'll put that back in its box. Underneath the two transistors and the diode, wires and things you'll need, particularly for the aerial, etc., and the wire for the little crystal earpiece. Put the diode back in there. Isn't that great that those boxes still exist? And yes, there's an AF116 in here, and I bet that transistors absolutely had it. You know, tin whiskers again. There's the AF116. But we'll give it a go. I think I'll open this end, which isn't quite so damaged. There you go. And pop the transistor out. I'm told that people were having to go to local electrical shops to replace the transistors as they were blowing them. Now, one or two of you who know about this sort of thing will notice something really interesting about this transistor. Do you notice all the legs are twisted together? So they're not sort of, you know, they're not separate from each other. And this is the one with the extra leg, the screen. And I just wonder whether that's been done by someone before I had it to burn off tin whiskers, because that would be one of the methods you'd use, of course. Who knows? But then they're all twisted together. I don't think the screen is separate. But anyway, there must be a reason for that we can only guess at. So, see if I can close that up without damaging it. So that goes back in there, that goes in there. And then the range of components, and they're all laid out beautifully. And the manual itself actually lists all the colour coding as well. Oh, look at that other carbon film. Is it Allen Bradley resistor? So one must have gone missing and been replaced. Maybe not. And they've used resistors that are way more... they can support higher powers than they need to. So they're bigger, they're a bit more chunky, and you can see the colours really clearly. And that's all in the manual, so you can learn what all these coloured bands mean. Okay, I'm doing too much talking, aren't I? But I ran Duke of Edinburgh for many, many years, and my colleague could not get the hang of what I was up to. But because I had so many groups doing bronze, silver and gold, I used to colour code the maps, so I knew which group it was. And to me, it was totally obvious that you would draw a route on a map that would be maybe blue, and that was group 6, and maybe green, and that was group 5, and orange and red, etc. We didn't have a group 0, but you get my point. I just find everybody should know the phonetic alphabet, and everybody should know the colours, how they relate to numbers, because it's just such a good coding system. So I'm stating the obvious now, but there's your Ferox cube or whatever, your ferrite bar there for the antenna, some coils. It's interesting to note that the potentiometer variable resistor and the little air-spaced capacitor has made in Holland written on it. So there's the Philips connection, but the transistors say made in England, which is interesting. So that's perhaps the Mullard connection. And then these mustard capacitors and the electrolytics, and we'll see if they still work. A little heat sink, the knobs, the feet that you're going to put the thing on, and of course the obligatory lamp, because this all predates LEDs. So what an absolutely lovely thing this is. And in a minute I'm going to ask you a question about what can we do with it all. So thanks very much for joining me on that video and taking a trip down memory lane. And how many of you did have one like this, or had an electric set that you built when you were a kid? And are there any girls out there, I mean, it'd be women now, who had one too and used it? Because back in the day, as I said, it was a little bit disappointing, but these things didn't seem to be steered towards women and girls, which is a bit of a shame, because we desperately need people like that in engineering, computer science, electronics, in fact, all of the sciences. Now, I did say I was going to ask you a question at the end of the video, and the question's this. I'm going to put on the screen the list of projects that you can build in this kit that I've got. And I haven't got the EE20, and I'm not going to add original components to this one. I'm just going to use this one to build something. But it was a case of build what? So if you look at the list of projects that we can build, can you suggest in the comments which one you would like me to build? And if I get enough interest in that, we'll get the kit out again. And instead of me just telling you stories, which you've probably had enough of, what we'll do is actually build one of the projects from this kit and see if it all still works. Now, I've got one in the list that I want to build, but I'm not going to say what that is. But what do you come up with? And we'll give it a little while. And when I've got some ideas of what you'd like to see me build, I'll pick one and I'll build it as another video, and we'll see if we can get it working. So thanks ever so much for joining me again in the Home Lab, and I do hope you enjoyed that video. Something a little bit different. I'm a little bit averse to those videos that are unboxing and things like that, but I think this is special and I really wanted to share it with you. But of course, this is only the first video. We're going to make something from this, and hopefully it will be a choice of yours. Anyway, as ever, do leave your comments. I absolutely love the comments. The video I feel that I make is only really half of the process, and I make my very best effort to answer absolutely every comment if I can, because without you, the channel is absolutely nothing. As ever, stay on to the end of the video after I've finished talking, and I usually cut in a few extra bits that I didn't include in the video. And finally, after that, when the video ends, you get those boxes which include links to videos that I've made already that I think will be of interest to you. Anyway, as ever, thank you for joining me, and as you know, I'll be publishing another video very soon.